Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're here today. I'm Amy from Neurotic Mom Bakes, and I'm revisiting my donuts today. Number one, because when I originally posted these over a year ago, they are in 3 parts, and I only showed you the chocolate glaze. So I thought I would show you a start to finish, very simple donut recipe with a vanilla glaze. This is so much easier than you think. Don't be intimidated by it. I need to talk about yeast really quick. There are 2 kinds that I use and recommend. There's the regular active dry yeast. All that means is that you need to activate the yeast in a warm liquid, about 110 degrees, for about 5 to 10 minutes until it gets foamy and bubbly. So you need to activate that yeast. Be careful of your temperature. If it's too hot, it'll kill the yeast. If it's too cold, it won't activate. Then there is the instant yeast, which I prefer because it's just a no-fail, no guessing game. It works every time. And you can just go right away. You don't need to let it sit and activate. So I have instant yeast today. I'm going to use that, but both work. We're going to start. I need 1.5 cups of lukewarm milk, and I'm going to put this in the microwave for about a minute. And then while that is going, let's go through the rest of the ingredients. You're going to need 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 eggs, 1/3 cup of shortening, and then about 5 to 6 cups of flour, and we'll talk about that later. And then your yeast, you're going to need 2 tablespoons of yeast. I actually am going to mix that up in 1/4 cup of warm water and then put it in the bowl. Okay, so I've got about 1/4 cup of warm water, just so you have something to mix the yeast in. And I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of this instant yeast. I'm just gonna kind of give that a stir. Kind of let it dissolve a little bit. This is going to go in my stand mixer, and I'm going to start with the whisk attachment. And I'm going to add this yeast mixture. I'm going to get a spatula so I can get all of it out. I'm going to get 1/2 cup of sugar. 1/3 cup of shortening. I'm going to show you how to do the water displacement measuring technique. It's really easy. If you don't have the shortening sticks, this is just a lot easier to measure out than trying to spoon it into a measuring cup and then scrape it all out. So in here I have exactly 2/3 cup of cold water, and then I'm just going to spoon little portions of shortening in until the water raises to read 1 cup, because 2/3 plus 1/3 equals a cup. And that's the water displacement method, which I learned in 8th grade, whatever it was called, the kitchen cooking class. Here we go. Then you're just going to drain the water and put the shortening in. All right, that's done. 1 teaspoon of salt, and 2 eggs. All right, let me just make sure I have everything. Yeast, water, milk, sugar, salt, eggs, shortening, flour. Okay, we're gonna whisk this up. Start low. Just gonna give that a little bit of a stir and start adding a little bit of flour. There's 1 cup. Okay, got that all mixed together. This is where I'm going to change my attachment to the bread hook. Okay, now this next step is pretty critical. And I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to start adding the flour about 1/2 cup at a time. It's going to be anywhere between 5 to 6 cups of flour, and I'm going to show you exactly what the dough should look like when you've added exactly the right amount of flour. So in there we have 2 cups. Again, we're just going to start 1/2 cup at a time. That's 3. That's 4. Just gonna let that come together. It's 4.5. I'm gonna add not quite 5. And then just see where we're at. Okay, this is about 5 cups of flour, and I wanna show you what this looks like. You can see it's still very wet and very sticky, so we are not even close. So I'm gonna add another 1/2 cup. Okay, that's another 1/2 cup there. I don't know if you can see, but it's still sticking to the bottom of the bowl and the sides of the bowl, and as it's falling off, there's still a lot left on the hook here. It's still sticking to my fingers, so we are not there yet. But add gradually. You can always add more, but you can't take away. Okay, let's check it. We're getting closer. It's not sticking as much. However, you will know that it's done. It will clean the bowl for you. The ball will all come together and the bowl will be clean, and then it will fall off the hook and leave a clean hook. We're close, but we are not quite there yet. I'm just gonna add a little bit of flour at a time. Okay, I think we are about there. Let's give it a check. So I'm gonna start by pulling it off the hook here. And you can see it's coming off mostly clean. However, it's still a bit sticky and it hasn't quite cleaned the bowl yet. So I mean like 2 tablespoons more. And this varies for me every single time I make a bread with yeast in it. Because there's lots of variables: humidity, temperature of your kitchen. Maybe you added a tiny bit more liquid that time. Okay, if you look inside the bowl, see how that just pulled right off the bottom? My bowl is clean. I can handle it without it sticking, and then when I pull it off the dough hook, see how clean that comes right off? Just pulls right off. We are ready. If you go past this stage, your bread or dough is going to be very tough and very dense, which we don't really want. So just barely want it to get it to that stage. And you know what? I'm gonna let my machine do a bit of the kneading before I hand knead. And I'll show you what that needs to look like before we let it do the first rise. In the meantime, I'm gonna get a bowl ready. Okay, if you've watched my other recipes that have a yeasted dough, you will know that I do the gluten test and the window pane test to tell if I have developed enough gluten in the bread. You want the gluten developed because that's going to give it a better rise, make it lighter and fluffier and not too dense. So let me move this out of the way. And first, I'm gonna pull a piece of dough. You're gonna hold it up to a light or a window, and you're gonna stretch it. And if you can see light through the dough before it breaks, then you know the gluten's developed. But you can see that broke right away. So there's not much gluten developed there. So we're gonna give it a good kneading and repeat that window pane test. And I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. Okay, let's give it a test. We're gonna start stretching it. And you can see some of the light's coming through and it's not breaking yet, but it broke sooner than I liked. So I'm gonna knead it for a few more minutes. All right, let's check it again. See, look, I'm able to stretch it quite a bit before it starts to break, but I'm still not quite happy with that. Okay, see, you can see the light through, it's not breaking. I have to pull quite a bit for it to break, so I think we're ready. I'm just gonna kind of create like a rounded ball. And right here I have a lightly greased bowl, and I'm just gonna drop it in and then cover it with some plastic. And I usually try to find a warm place in my kitchen. It will just accelerate the rise time, but you're going to want to let this sit anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes until it's doubled in size. I will often put it in my windowsill if there's sun shining. or like by the heater vent or on the floor in a sun patch, but it's kind of cloudy today, so it might take a little bit longer. Now, while that's rising, I'm going to get the vanilla glaze prepped. So let's do that next. All right, now I'm ready to get started on my glaze, my vanilla glaze, and I'm going to need 1/4 cup of butter that's very softened. I'm gonna stick this in the microwave on like defrost for like 15 seconds. Okay, so this is very soft but not melted, and the reason why you want it very soft, you just don't want any butter chunks left in the glaze, and it's hard to get rid of those if it's still a little bit cold. Okay, 1/4 cup of very soft butter, and then I'm going to add about 2 cups of powdered sugar, 2 to 3 cups. Just, it kind of depends on the consistency that you want. I like it a little bit thicker, but you can always add more later. I'm gonna start with a little over 2 cups, and then I'm going to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. And the reason for the corn syrup, it gives it that nice, shiny look on the glaze. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of this. A little splash of vanilla, like a 1/2 teaspoon. And then I'm going to start with 1 tablespoon of milk. I'm gonna add that gradually until I get the consistency I want, but I'm gonna start with just 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to start mixing this up. Using my hand mixer for this. You can use a whisk, I've done it before, or a spoon even. Okay, at this point you can see it's quite thick, so let's add another tablespoon of milk. A little goes a long way. That's looking good, but it's still probably too thick to dip your donuts in. So I'm like a half a tablespoon. Tiny splash. Now, if you are wanting the really glazed look, that's not like just sitting on top like frosting, like glazed donuts that you can just drizzle over the donuts, go ahead and add a lot more milk to get that more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? More of a kind of a see-through glaze. I'm going for more of a thicker glaze that just sits on the top half of the donut, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. I want it thick enough so that it won't drip all down the sides of my donut, but thin enough I can dip it and it won't grab the donut from my hand. It's just hard to do it, and it'll kind of pull the donut apart, I guess. I think this is good. I think we're gonna go with that. Okay, I'm going to cover this with a piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to push it down so that it touches the top of the glaze while I'm waiting for the donuts to fry and rise and everything. Otherwise, you'll get a skin that forms on the top of that glaze, which is no good. So if you just cover it and push it all the way down, it'll be good to go for when you're ready to dip your donuts. This went a little crazy. I left it a little bit too long, but it should be fine. The best part, you get to punch it down, pull it out. I already have a very well floured surface. You're gonna wanna be able to lift the donuts off without handling them too much. It'll kind of mess up their shape. So lots and lots of flour. Pull this out. I like to kind of leave the smooth surface on top. And we are going to roll this out. About 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch thick, fairly thick, but it will rise again. Keep that in mind. And then it will also puff up even a little bit more in the fryer. So this can go a little bit thinner than what you think donuts would be. I've got this all rolled out, and I have a round cookie cutter and I have a large piping tip. I find that I like this size for the donut holes the best. So first we're gonna start by cutting our circles out. This usually gives me about a dozen, 12 to 15 donuts, just depending on how thin you roll your donuts, or your dough. Now I'm just gonna get my little piping tip and go right in the center there. Whoops. Okay, now with this excess dough, you can try pulling it back together and rolling it out again. It's really tricky. It's not it doesn't come back together very well. So what I like to do is, let me just finish this last one. What I like to do is just get this and just cut as many donut holes out as I can fit. And then with the excess, I will just cut into like little pieces and fry those and roll them in some powdered sugar or cinnamon sugar. That way you get to use every bit of the dough. And then these donut holes, you can either pour some glaze over those or roll those in cinnamon sugar or powdered sugar. Okay, let's pull this excess off. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just gonna kind of spread these around so they're not so close together, because they will rise a little bit. Just wanna make sure there's flour under all of them. So when I go to pick them up, I'm gonna do, we're gonna do a second rise, again for about 30 to 45 minutes until they've doubled in size. And I'm just going to cover, I'm just gonna cover these with a towel. Okay, we'll let that do its thing. All right, let's take a look at these. Yes, they are perfect. We are ready to fry. So in here I have some vegetable oil and I've heated it up to about 375 to 400 degrees. Please be careful if you have kids or pets around. This is so hot. Just be very careful. It scares me a little bit. So for the donut holes, I have in here some cinnamon sugar ready to go, because I'm going to put the donut holes right in there while they still have the oil on them a little bit, so it will stick. And then I'm going to place, I've got some paper towels underneath this rack right here, and I'm gonna put my donuts on there. So let me think, let's start with the donuts first. Carefully place them in. This goes fast. I like to use a wooden spoon or some tongs, have that ready to go, because these go fast. We're talking 30 seconds to 60 seconds per side. Lay them gently away from you as you place them in, and only do about 6 or 7 at a time. And it's just kind of easy to get the back of the wooden spoon and put it in the hole and flip it over. I mean, this just goes really fast. Like, look at that, that's already brown. I don't even think that was 30 seconds. That one's about ready, this one's ready. And just keep checking them, because again, this just goes so fast. Like, that's done. Done. This is the fastest part of the whole process. It's like a 2-hour process, and then it takes 2 minutes to fry. If you feel like they're cooking too fast, just turn your temperature down a little bit. However, if you cook them at too low of a temperature, they'll absorb too much oil, and they'll be dense and oily, and that's no good. The second batch goes a tiny bit slower because you've cooled the oil down with that first batch. You add something to it, it kind of brings the temperature down. But there we go. Now we're going. Okay, those are done. Now let's just quickly do the donut hole. These are a little trickier. They have a hard time turning on the other side. You just kind of have to roll them around, try to flip them, but they're kind of stubborn about flipping over. They won't be totally even in color, but they will be cooked through, just because they're so small. Okay, now while they've still got that oil on them, just toss them in the cinnamon sugar. All right, these donuts are nice and cooled down, and let's just make some good old-fashioned vanilla sprinkle donuts. I have my glaze here. I gave it a good stir, checked for consistency, and I'm ready to dip, and then I just have some sprinkles over here to decorate. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop it about halfway down and then just lift it up, kind of shake off the excess. And then turn it over. A few sprinkles. Yes, I love that. And repeat. Kind of tricky getting that first, that glaze off. This is the part I think that would be fun with the kids. Once they're fried, they can have fun dipping and decorating. There's millions of different kinds of sprinkles or candy that you could put on top. This is the fun part. There we go. Look how pretty and delicious those look. Okay friends, there we go. Donuts, easy, right? I promise you can do these. Anyone can make these. They look complicated, but they're really easy. And I hope I'm able to walk you through all the steps. And if you have questions, just make sure to ask below and I will try to answer them. And if you like this tutorial and if you want to see more content like this, just make sure you subscribe to my channel. See you next time.